On November 26, 2024, City Council voted to continue funding the shelter that serves Norman's unhoused population. The two people on council who are running for mayor, Larry Heikkila and Stephen Holman, have two very different views on this issue and on the role city government should play. The following 15 minutes of comment by these individuals best captures what sort of leadership role they would take in the future.
Just thanks everybody for coming and expressing your thoughts tonight. I've heard a lot of really good arguments for and against. Taking out the emotional arguments that have been made, I just keep coming back to this went to a vote of the people, and it didn't pass. The majority of people that came out and voted that day said no. We don't want to spend $5 million on a permanent homeless shelter. So here we are trying to cleverly subvert the will of the voter. And I just can't get past that. And I think, I just can't get past that.
Anything else from council? Oh, yes, sir.
This button's not working.
So a few things. If we want to talk about the elections in 2020 and the 4 bond items that were on it, number 1 was parks and recreational community facilities, extra funding for the YFAC and the senior center and other projects. It failed. 41% voted yes, 58% voted no. The city still invested money into the YFAC to get it completed and the senior center, which many people in this room and on this council supported. Proposition number 3, municipal facilities, which included improvements and a remodel to the police department, failed by 61%. But earlier in the previous meeting, we were talking about spending money on remodeling the police department. Proposition number 4, economic and community development projects, small business relief because of COVID, failed 59%. Proposition number 2, homeless shelter and community facilities. 22,803 votes were cast on that issue. It failed by 50.8%. It failed by, out of almost 23,000 votes cast, failed by 369 votes. 4 of the 8 wards voted for it, and 4 of the 8 wards voted against it. If you look at a map, a precinct map of Norman, in that election, you'll see that all of core Norman, all the areas most impacted by visible homeless, voted for it. The further you got away from it is where people voted no. The people that are least impacted by it voted no. The people most impacted by it voted yes. And you all are welcome to see this data for yourself. It's available on the Oklahoma State Election Board website. That proposal was a $5 million bond to build a permanent shelter that had no location and no plan at all. It was a response to COVID and the anticipation that we were likely going to see an increase in homelessness due to people losing their jobs, getting sick, their husband, their wife dying. I'm all for sending this to a vote of the people, actually, because I think it will pass. Because I think Norman cares about this issue. And every meeting that we've had about it, I keep a tally. Every meeting that we've had about this issue, more people speak in favor of the shelter than against it. Please feel free to fact check me on that. To construct a new permanent shelter will require money that I think will require a vote of the people for some kind of bond to do it. Unless we can find an existing building, which we haven't been able to do, the one that we looked at on Griffin is apparently not suitable, and they're not interested in letting us use it. The piece of property we're looking at doesn't have anything on it, so we would have to build something. And the city of Norman does not have the money lying around to build a new building. So we will need a public vote, in my opinion, to approve funding to do that. But voting no on building a permanent shelter has not stopped homelessness from increasing in Norman. In the last decade, Norman has grown by over 20,000 people. As was mentioned, we're one of the fastest growing cities in the state of Oklahoma. We're in the top 6 of SEC cities in population growth and growth rate over the last 10 years. Our population has more than double the growth of Moore in the last 10 years, more than Edmond, and we're only slightly behind Tulsa in total population growth over the last decade, even though they are a much larger city than we are. A lot of folks that talk about increasing homeless act like it happens in a vacuum, as in homeless is increased, but the city of Norman isn't growing, that our population is not growing, but it is. And we're growing exponentially more in total population than our homeless population is growing. We are having severe issues with housing affordability, a high demand. The latest NBR, Norman Board of Realtors report, shows that the home values in Norman exceed the metro area average. That means people want to be here. The property in Norman is valuable. People want to build homes in Norman, drive around Norman, and you will see construction happening absolutely everywhere. I have $400,000 plus homes being built in my ward right now, south of Highway 9. We've had over a dozen new businesses open in downtown Norman since this shelter opened 2 years ago, several of which relocated from somewhere else in Norman so they could be on Main Street. 2 brand new restaurants are opening. One already, Tamashi, spent $1 million on renovating the building they're in so they could open a restaurant there. They're right 1 block from this shelter. Why would they do that? Why would they invest all that money into that building right next to that shelter if it's such an undesirable place to be? Salvation Army opened in Norman in 1967 on North Porter, providing shelter to homeless people. Salvation Army's Food and Shelter for Friends opened in 1981 right here on James Garner Boulevard where the well is currently, and it was there from 1981 until 2017. Yet folks act like this is a new thing that never existed before 2020, before the previous mayor was here. But I grew up here, and so did my dad, and so did my grandfather, and so did my great-grandfather. And it has always been here. It's been here as long as Griffin Hospital has existed in this city, which is over 100 years. As someone mentioned, the animal shelter. The current budget for the animal shelter is $200,000 per month. And we all love animals, and we want to take care of them. But what's the priority? That's over 4 times, almost 4 times the amount that we're proposing to spend on this shelter for people to keep them from freezing to death. Oklahoma is one of, if not the most inhospitable place in the United States to be homeless. There is no good time in this state to live outside. It is freezing cold in the winter. It is boiling hot in the summer. It's 95 degrees in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. in July and August. And in the spring and the fall, we have severe weather where you get softball-sized hail and tornadoes and 90-mile-an-hour winds. This month of November, the most rain we've ever had in a November in state history since they started recording it. Imagine living outside in Oklahoma through all of that and thinking that people would choose to do it, choose to live here of all places. If you were going to be homeless, why would you choose here? Why? It is extremely inhospitable. Politics aside, the environment and the climate here is not favorable to being outside for extended periods of time. I've said before that I would agree to close this shelter the moment that another viable alternative is in place. The moment another location is available, I would vote to move this shelter out of downtown. And if any other entities came forward to fund the operation of a shelter, I would remove the city from being a part of that. The city operated the original shelter in the library. and it went really well. The city operated the shelter on Comanche Street, and there were issues, and we determined that we did not want to be in the business of operating a shelter anymore. So what did we do when we moved it to Gray Street? We put out an RFP and asked for proposals for someone else who's more specialized in operating a facility like that to do it instead of the city. We are providing the funding to operate it. They don't get any handouts while they're there. They get a bed to sleep in. There's no shower, there's no place for their pets, there's no food provided unless volunteers make it themselves and drop it off. They literally just get a bed to sleep in every night. And they get connected to services that we have. And over the last 2 years, they have helped hundreds of people get out of homelessness in Norman, off the streets, temporary shelter, and into permanent supportive housing. Hundreds of people. They have saved people's lives, that shelter existing. So when I hear folks talk about it's a disaster, it's a debacle, it hasn't done anything positive, you are wrong. You are absolutely wrong. It has saved people's lives. Again, this is an extremely emotional issue. I'd like to be able to take the emotion out of it, and I usually can. But with this issue, we're talking about people's lives. And we're talking about people who feel inconvenienced by the sight of this. But you're not thinking about the people that are actually in that situation and what they're going through. It may be bad for you, but think about how bad it is for them. They have to sit around and wonder every day if this elected body, who is up for election every 2 years, is going to decide to kick them out on the street or not. And I agree with a lot of what is said. We don't have a silver bullet solution. I'm not proposing a silver bullet solution, and none of us up here have been able to come up with the solution to homelessness in Norman. But I can tell you right now, for as long as homelessness exists and as long as Norman continues to grow in population and size, that's going to be an issue that we're going to have to deal with. One way or the other. There's going to be people suffering from mental illness and physical disabilities. There's going to be people that cannot afford to live here, that work at McDonald's and all the other drive-thrus and service industry jobs we have across this city. And so we do need more comprehensive solutions. I agree that what we've been doing has been keeping a Band-Aid on an issue. We've been trying to manage it. But we can't do it ourselves, we know. Even though we often feel like the city that we're being put in a position where we have to take on this issue for the whole county. So I am going to support this, and I'm going to continue supporting it until another viable option is in place that would address this situation. Because as many of you said, just closing it with nothing else in place is not going to improve this situation. And moving the shelter is not going to change the fact that there are people with mental illness that wander around this city. Those people aren't staying at the shelter now, so moving it isn't going to change that. So anyway, I could go on and on about it, but I am going to support this, and I'm going to continue to support and propose and explore any other options. And as I've said before, if you have any suggestions for where we could move this shelter or what could take its place, but temporary hotel rooms for a few nights is not going to do it. And there aren't that many available. We are out of housing vouchers. HUD is not funding the Norman Housing Authority anymore this year. The waiting list is a year long if you can get a voucher. And then once you get one, you have 90 days to use it. And if you can't find a place, then you got to start all over. So imagine yourself having to go through that process. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to vote yes.
Thank you. Not to disagree with you or to counter back, but I see it as a different way of looking at things. I would agree if there were such a thing as a solution, if we could find that answer. And I think there are people that are looking for that answer. I'd be on your side of voting yes for this, and I'm not. As a function of a municipal government, I can understand any kind of infrastructure, almost any kind of infrastructure type of idea, anything that's like that. But I don't see us being a welfare or social or, I'm not sure what the right word is. We're not that driver. That is not part of our function. It is a function of Salvation Army, of food and shelter, of other good people that do try to do good things around here. That's their function. To me, it seems like if a person wants to sit down there and support, give money towards homelessness, those are the people that they need to give them to. When we take tax money, we take it indiscriminately from everybody. We don't ask people, you know, should we spend it on this, that, or the other. But I think when I go around, I must be in a completely different group of people than you are, because there are people that answer me and they say, we don't want our tax money spent that way. And so, and I get both. I understand that. Remember, I did 8 years as a jail chaplain. I was 3 years at Mission Norman. Those are times that I understood a lot of what was going on, and I have complete compassion for those people. But the fact is it the city's responsibility, or is it society's responsibility to take care of those people? And so as we look at society, the government is not society to me. So I'm going to vote no on this. I agree with you that we spend too much money on animals, but I'll get beat up for saying that. So it's just one of the things that goes on. And this thing does keep on continuing forever. And so finding a solution to it is frustrating, and it's hard, and there are a lot of emotions that go into it. But if we look at it just as a purely taking care of people, taking care of what goes there, I think that that's a function of the charities, those kinds of people. United Way, I wish would do it, but obviously they're not going to do it. So my vote on this is no. Are there any other comments from council?